Now, the latest labour force survey to be released by Stats SA today is expected to show that another 11 million people have lost their jobs. This will raise the unemployment level to 35%. That's only officially. The unofficial number is much higher. While labour experts say there is an urgent need to create new jobs and protect those that do remain, this latest bargaining council disputes, they show that organised labour could be out of touch with reality. Ongoing tussles are likely to lead to even more job losses if companies are forced to give in. Let's get you some analysis on this issue now. Labour consultant Tony Healy joins us now via our video line. Tony, I think we can all predict just the bloodbath that we're set to see with the announcement by Stats SA on the jobs numbers today. But how does Labour come into the fray and actually do something that will mitigate these losses in the long run?
Good morning, Michelle. Well, there are things that organised labour can do, and I think one of the things they can do, for example, is become more realistic when it comes to their wage proposals. You know, this really isn't business as usual, and the old, if you like, rhetoric of demanding CPI plus 5% or CPI plus 10% really has no place in the current world of work where businesses are struggling to stay afloat. So that's perhaps one thing they can cease doing, because it's simply not appropriate in the current circumstances. The other is that, you know, with so many job losses, and we're going to see heightened numbers today, with probably in the region of about 11 million South Africans out of work, and that is the worst in the world. I think Labour needs to rethink how it approaches its relationship with employers as a whole and look at ways of engaging them more meaningfully in ways of protecting and preserving jobs.
Yeah. And I guess the question also comes up, Tony, about how relevant organised labour continues to be post-COVID-19. I mean, I'm looking at some of the numbers here. Membership is, in fact, at an all-time low. Since the early 90s, not a lot of employed people are part of organised labour unions.
Well, that's quite right, Michelle. You know, the numbers have been dropping for quite some time, even pre-COVID. You know, approximately 1 in 8 South Africans are union members, and the vast majority of those, to be honest, are in the public sector. And of course, with the many, many job losses that we've seen, and there will be more to come, that will also dampen union membership across the country. So Labour really has, for some time, needed to find a way of identifying how they become relevant and more relevant, and how they protect the broader interests of their members, in the understanding, as you've rightly said, that membership figures have been dropping for quite some time.
I mean, looking at all of this in the light of what Moody's has just come out and said, the fact that South Africa's debt to GDP ratio by 2023 will actually exceed 100%. Is Labour taking all of these things into consideration, the health of the economy, the bloodbath that we're seeing in terms of just one of the things, debt to GDP?
Well, I think that's one of the criticisms that can also be laid at the doorstep of organised labour. They don't appreciate the fact that all of the quantitative easing, all of the COVID support and COVID relief that we're seeing is ultimately being funded by delayed tax. So we're going to absolutely, and this is probably a world phenomenon, we're going to see heightened taxes to recoup some of these costs. And these are taxes which the corporate world are also going to be faced with. So add that to high payrolls, and I think that's all the more reason why Labour needs to be a little more realistic when it comes to understanding, promoting the interests of their members. Yeah. They absolutely have a job to do to protect fairness, and that's quite a legitimate responsibility. They have an understandable right to try and increase wages, but where possible, realistically, in a situation where it really isn't business as usual.
Tony, as we build up to those numbers being released by Stats SA later today, in your work as a labour consultant, what's been your experience during the COVID-19 period insofar as job losses and retrenchments are concerned?
Well, funny enough, we've just recently done an analysis across our client base across the country, and over 80% of them have retrenched. And there are others that are contemplating do so. That's a startling number, and I think that's a fair anecdotal reflection what we're seeing across the country.
And Tony, do you find that in your experience in this industry that those in lower paying jobs are much, much more vulnerable when it comes to these jobs numbers?
Look, unskilled positions are invariably more at risk. And it's been especially the case with the hospitality industry, which is the barrier to entry is relatively low when it comes to skills, although there are many skilled individuals in that industry. And construction, for example, the kinds of industries that are labor absorbent. So when those industries get hit, then particularly the unskilled levels become affected. And it's in the unskilled area that you'll find that the so-called discouraged workers are positioned. In other words, the broader definition of unemployment includes those who are available to be employed but are so discouraged by the fact that employment opportunities are so poor that they've stopped looking. And most of that category of employees comes from the unskilled ranks, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I mean, Tony, these are the people that are not necessarily, I mean, those who are not part of a union, those who are unemployed and are no longer job seekers, these are not the people that unions, in fact, are fighting for. It just begs the question how relevant, again, unions are when it comes to our jobs crisis in South Africa.
That's an important point, Michelle. We must remember that trade unions act on and on behalf of their union members only. They don't especially have an interest in non-members, and many of them are unemployed. So when they talk of a 20% increase, for example, for their members at a particular employer, they're ignoring the fact that there are vast numbers of people unemployed who potentially could be employed if they moderated their wage demands.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Tony, thanks very much for your insights. Unfortunately, we're out of time. But this is as we build up to Statistics South Africa releasing the jobs numbers a little later on today. There is an expectation that those numbers will reveal a jump in unemployment to around 35%. That translates to around 11 million people that are without jobs. These are the official numbers. The unofficial numbers much, much higher.